have a special episode today, but before we get into it, just a reminder that the 2026-27 Distinguished PE virtual course starts in just a couple weeks. Our first two sessions are August 11th and August 25th. We'll cover the foundational topics of how to ensure that your PE classes are inclusive of all students and how to set high expectations for student behavior while holding students accountable to them. There's still time to sign up. Head over to the website where you'll have the option to register for 3 graduate credits from Colorado State University or a 100-hour certificate that can be used to renew your teaching license. We've got a great group this year, including one PE teacher from Singapore and another from Africa. I can't wait to meet and learn alongside them, and we hope you'll join us too. Also, the Distinguished PE K-5 curriculum is now available. Head over to the website and click on Curriculum, where you'll be able to download a free sample of Unit 1 for both K2 and 3-5. I recommend reading through the implementation guide so you can see what makes this curriculum different from anything else out there. Check out the guide and the sample units, and if you like what you see, there are options to purchase several different plans that will meet your needs. Enter code DPE25 for a special discount for podcast listeners. This is just the beginning for the curriculum. There are many exciting new units and collaborations already in the works. Okay, PE teachers, I'm going to ask you for a favor today. This episode is a little bit different because it's a celebration of a new book that my friend Amy and I have just published called, you guessed it, Distinguished Music Education. It's a project that we've been working on for a couple of years now, and we're both really excited that it's finally available. While I hope that you still listen to this episode, we do make connections between PE and music several times. My ask is that you share it with the music teacher in your school. Just a quick text or email telling them about this great podcast that you listen to and how we did an episode for music teachers that they should check out. Links for both Apple and Spotify will be in the notes of the episode, so you can just copy and paste to share them with a music teacher in your life. Thank you so much for all of your support, for listening to these episodes over the past 2 years, and for subscribing. There are going to be some really incredible episodes coming out this year, starting on August 31st with my all-time favorite, an interview with seated student athlete Lucy Harris. It's definitely one you want to hear. PE teachers, see you at the end of the month, and hello to all of the music teachers who are listening. My guest today is Amy Friedhaber. Amy received a Bachelor of Music in Music Education with a minor in Speech Pathology from State University of New York College at Fredonia, and a master's from the University of Colorado in Educational Psychology. This is her 24th year in education. 14 of those were as a music teacher, and the last 10 have been as a colleague of mine on our team of instructional coaches in Denver Public Schools. Over the years, Amy has taught music in grades ECE through 8 and continues to direct the Stevens Jams Choir for the Colorado Children's Chorale. She is also the co-author of the new book, Distinguished Music Education. It's a project that we're really proud of and are excited to share more about it with you all today. Amy is an expert when it comes to high-quality music education. Like me, she's had the opportunity not just to teach students, but also to observe over 1,000 lessons from hundreds of different teachers. It's an incredibly unique position to be in, and we're grateful that we get to share what we've learned from so many amazing teachers over the years with each of you. And now I bring you Amy Friedhaber. Hi, Amy. Welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Gary. Good morning.
We co-authored a music education adaptation of the PE book that I published 2 years ago. I think we started about a year and a half ago, but these last several months, it kind of felt like a full-time job. It has been a pleasure to collaborate with you and learn from you. Not only did I learn a lot about music education, but you made my PE work stronger as well. Music teachers from around the world are going to benefit from your expertise, so thank you for all the sacrifices that you made in order to create this amazing resource.
Yeah, it did kind of become a full-time job, and it was amazing. And I really appreciate the opportunity and also learned a ton about my own self, about how to really communicate clearly when we're trying to share with people. So I appreciate it.
I want to start off with what drew you to this project, and what does this book offer music teachers that's different from what's already out there?
There's a lot of different places, right? You can go to music workshops, you can go to music conferences to learn about how to teach a song, what songs students like, how to engage students in music, manipulatives you can create to really get students engaged. But in all those experiences, there's not a lot of opportunities to really think about how students are understanding music, musical concepts, how do they think as musicians, making musical choices. It's more, okay, this is what you're going to present to students. Here's the song, have them play this game. This is what they're learning. But not always do they understand what they're learning. So I think that is the difference between this book and other things that are out there. And I learned that myself as a music teacher. I had kids from a time they were 4 to 14, and I went to tons of workshops and conferences to make sure I was engaging them and finding fun activities and songs and things they would like. But then as my students grew in my own classroom, I would use musical terms like, okay, crescendo here, or like play that piano. And they'd be like looking at me with funny faces, right? Like, what do you mean? I realized I'm your teacher. I've been the one who's been teaching you, and you can play and you can go on stage and put on amazing performances, which they did. And they were wonderful singers. So they could really make music, but they weren't really able to articulate what they were doing all the time. And they weren't able to take my cues with like musical vocabulary or speak as musicians. So I had to really reflect on that and look in the mirror and think about like, why can't they do that? I've been teaching them these things. I've been saying these words, this musical vocabulary, but they weren't retaining it. So it's really important to me, as I learned with my own students, to make sure that I'm also giving them ways and time to articulate their understanding, not just show their amazing performance off to people.
Well, I think there's a lot of parallels there between music and PE, and we're going to talk later about how music and PE teachers can find opportunities to collaborate with each other. But what I see sometimes when I attend workshops or conferences, don't get me wrong, there's some fantastic sessions out there that focus on instructional methods in PE, but there's also those sessions that are, well, there was one session in Kansas City at the national conference. I think it was titled 60 Activities in 60 Minutes. And that reminds me of what you just said about just learning about either activities or just learning about songs, as opposed to what we're trying to do in our collaboration, which is weave in the instructional methods along with having those fun activities for PE teachers and those engaging songs for music teachers.
Yeah. And I think as new teachers, right, or even like, teachers have been teaching for a while who need something new, that's really important. You need the activities because we don't have a curriculum to be like, do this, teach this song for this. So we're trying to find and gather those things depending on who your students are and what they're going to connect with. So you need those activities, and that's important. And in order to create a distinguished music classroom, we need to have the learning being articulated as well. And that's something I didn't start teaching that way. I didn't have that belief as a new teacher. I didn't even have that belief as like a young teacher. But as I was able to teach and have this amazing experience of teaching kids for like their lifetime in my school, I realized how important it was. It really is important that when you leave here, you not only know how to perform, but you can walk into a middle school or high school classroom and be successful. You walk into a community choir or to a drama classroom where you're having to learn how to build music into that, and you can speak and understand what people are saying to you. And to me, that was really important for my students.
You mentioned students articulating their learning a couple of times as a really important part of your music philosophy. Just like in the distinguished PE philosophy, where students not only have to physically demonstrate various skills, they also have to be able to talk about them. Your approach to music education expects both performance and articulation of learning for students. Can you share with listeners what that looks like? And also, why is it so important that students can do both of these things?
One, it really looks like, I think sometimes teachers see this or they hear like, I used to, as a young teacher, I remember having an administrator come in and be like, well, kids need to be saying this and doing an exit ticket. And I was like, I'm teaching music here, man. I want kids to be making music, want them to love music. And then I realized we need to weave in these opportunities for language. So what that looks like to me and what that looked like in my classroom was just quick little opportunities for students to turn and talk. I had the amazing opportunity to be able to get a lot of Kagan training. So I utilize a lot of Kagan cooperative learning structures, many of which, are universal that we put in the book for teachers to be able to utilize. But it really does look like making music engaging in music, and then having quick little opportunities to talk about it, to ask questions about it, to build understanding from our peers. So it's not like one or the other. It really needs to be a melding of the two together. And still, I believe, with the majority of the time spent making music, with these little opportunities that you build in of how do you turn and talk to somebody? How do you look someone in the eye? How do you listen? What does that look like for students? And then in my classroom, it was talking about, okay, what did we do well? What do we need to work on? We did a lot of performances, right? So we had to really listen to ourselves, either in the moment or recordings of ourselves. And that looked like turning and talking about, okay, what did I do well? What do I need to do the next time? Like, what do I need to do? Do we need to add dynamics? Do we need to adjust our balance? It also was for younger kids when they're composing music or making music, being able to justify, why are you choosing a tambourine instead of a drum? Why are you choosing a maraca instead of whatever else might be there for them to choose? So it really is, I believe, most of the time making music and then weaving in multiple opportunities for students to discuss with each other and share their voice.
So, what this reminds me of actually is ideal student responses. And it's something that we write about in a couple of different places in the book. And the foundation of the ideal student response is that at the end of class, whether it's a classroom teacher or a principal or a parent at the end of the school day, when they ask their students, what did you learn in music class today? Students should be able to tell them what they learned, the standards-based content that they learned, and not just say that they performed something during class. Do you have an ideal student response that you could share with listeners just so that they can get an idea of what something might sound like?
Yeah, as I think about the lesson in chapter 9, the elementary distinguished lesson, I think back to students composing their own music. So, one ideal response that came from that chapter, a student would be saying, today in music, I composed a song about myself. I chose the dynamics of forte because I am confident and brave, and I use 16th notes to show that I'm a fast runner when I play soccer and I'm energetic. These musical choices help tell my story without using words. There's musical content vocabulary in there that we're focusing on in class. There's a level of explaining, I compose my own piece. There's some autonomy for students. It's culturally relevant because they're able to really connect to themselves. And then they really are able to articulate why they chose what they chose, rather than, okay, here's a composition, use these notes, quarter note, eighth note, okay, play it, done. I've done that in my own classroom, but it's like really trying to elevate it to make it really purposeful, not just what goes on the paper, but really explaining what the choices they made. And then also the biggest important piece that isn't in this ideal student response is then students performing that composition using all the notation, all the things that they've learned.
And in the book, we detail how you utilize that ideal student response, how you build lesson objectives, content and language objectives off of that, and then how you backwards plan off of that ideal student response in order to create questions for assessment or for checking for understanding of student progress toward those standards-based concepts. The other thing that this makes me think of is another similarity to PE, which is the reputation of a music program. As specials teachers, we're always having to defend our programs. And we know, unfortunately, that when building leaders are in positions where they have to make a decision on whether they're going to cut a program, PE, art, music, those are usually the first ones that they think about. There's a huge difference between a PE program where students come out and they're red in the face and they're sweaty and they say that they just played soccer and had a great time, or a music program where students just learned how to play their instrument or sing a song, versus being able to articulate their standards-based knowledge. Not only is this good for students, of course, but when building leaders have to make decisions, they think back to your music program and that kids aren't just coming out of the classroom saying that they learned a new song today. They're able to articulate what they learned.
Yeah, I think that's huge. I always say that one of our jobs that we're not really taught in college or as you are taught to be a teacher is how to advocate for your program. We still need to learn how to do that and make sure that we're able to really advocate for ourselves. But I think what you're saying is an easy way without having to do or say anything. You are building students who are not only able to play music or engage in activities, it is really about being able to engage in this activity and understand why and articulate why. And then you don't only have to advocate for yourself, you have a school of students who now are advocating for your program because they're learning, they're growing, and they're able to show all they're doing because we are able to show that in different ways than classroom teachers, right? We are on stages, we are showing up for community events, for culture nights. I think it also shows students that they are learning more than just a game. They are learning more than just a song. And I've made it a point in my classroom and for my performances for students also to go up and narrate in between everything that we are ever performing to share all the learning that they did in between. So we're not just going up there to show, like, be on stage and like play all of our songs. We're going up here in between saying, like, this is what we did to get here. We created this ourselves by using this word or this concept or this theme or whatever it is. And then we're also building students' capacity, again, to advocate for our programs. And it just shows up that is a necessity rather than having to like fight for that.
All right, Amy, you convinced me that giving students opportunities to articulate their learning in music classes is important as well. We're going to move over to assessment, one of our favorite topics, something that we could talk about for hours, but we're just going to scratch the surface today. How do you actually assess student learning in music when you're factoring in not just how well students can play or sing, but also whether or not they can articulate their learning?
I do think this is one of the more challenging things in the PE classroom or the gym or the music classroom. Because of the nature of our contents, we don't necessarily have everything set up or have all the materials daily for students to be like writing down their responses and on computers. But I think with strong rituals and routines in your classroom, makes it a little easier. So I think, of course, we're going to be gathering data on can students perform, can students play. We're still always doing that. That is huge and a necessity. But I think the other ways we do that is by making sure students have opportunities for peer discussion that we can hear and listen to. I can't hear every single student response, but one thing that we brought up in the chapter is for every class, listening to and assessing a handful of students on that day. And that's something that made it attainable for me with teaching so many students. So, listening to students in their peer conversations, when students are analyzing their own performances, having them fill out a quick reflection sheet at the end of class, having them write down their strengths of what they needed to do and their next steps, and then you can circle back to that. I also think that ensuring students know the criteria for success that they're going to be assessed on is really important. So even having them circle their own self-reflection rubric and then having me at the same time circle what I'm feeling they're doing is really important. And that can be in performance and articulation of language, right? In that same rubric. So students can also see the importance of both of those things. So again, it's not always the easiest thing, but in my classroom, I built bins that had papers, pencils, whiteboards, some composition stuff, and everything was just always in there. And then it was so easy to just pull them out, and students knew what was expected of them when that came, and like easy cleanup, and everything was ready to go. So I think that's kind of what it looks like: little exit tickets, some listening in, and just again building that routine so it becomes part of their learning and their practice. So it's not just only performing, but they know they're also going to have to share some responses as well.
Assessment can be really overwhelming for specials teachers who see hundreds of kids every day. So I think you did such a great job in that chapter of breaking down the things that you're looking for as a music teacher, how to effectively and efficiently collect that data, and what reasonable expectations should be. We're not advocating that teachers collect data points on every single student every single day for both performance of a music task or activity and for articulation of learning. I just think that you did a really great job of balancing those components so that teachers can collect some data. They can use that data, of course, for student grades, but more importantly, they can use that data to inform their instruction and adjust instruction in the future.
For me, if the data doesn't help me as a teacher know what my students need, then it's not worthwhile data. I am not collecting data on anything that is not helping me adjust instruction to support students. One thing I did find over the years is that when actually students are writing out their responses and sharing their strengths, their feedback, or even like a little quiz on rhythmic notation or, whatever, they're used to that. They are used to learning and taking an assessment. So Again, going back to what we just discussed, it also helps them to better understand, oh, I am actually learning in here. We know they're always learning, but they don't know all the things they're learning just by engaging or doing. But I think it does, in students' eyes, also make it more legitimate when they're held a little bit more accountable. And I really started to understand that in teaching middle school. That's how students are assessed in every other space. I don't think it should be that way all the time, but it does help them to be able to showcase that, I think.
A couple times today, you mentioned student needs and differentiation. We wrote about that in the book. I think it might be one of the longest chapters that's in there because it's so important, making sure that students have all the different resources and modifications and extensions that they need. Music classes are similar to PE also in that they both involve hands-on learning, demonstration of skills, and also students who come in at varying skill levels. How can music teachers differentiate instruction so every student stays engaged and can experience success?
That's a great question, Gary. And I think it's kind of key to building our programs. I think first and foremost, you have to know your students. You have to be able to build relationships with them to get to know who they are and what they need. That is the only way I was able to actually differentiate for my students, is just to know who they are. Having a clear objective, I think, is also key. So we have to know what our objective is before we can differentiate that for students. That's really important. From there, then you can differentiate through complexity of the task, through instrumentation potentially. You could differentiate with different scaffolds, or even in instruments like color coding things for students. When I was teaching middle school, I would orchestrate pop songs to like our Orff ensemble pieces. And when I was doing that, I had to really think about, first of all the different layers of the song, of course, but like, where could this student play and find success, but then also be challenged? Where are my students who are like playing beautifully? Like, how can I push them by playing the melody, the full melody of the song, which is really hard on this instrument? So I think that's one of the ways, for example, in an Orff ensemble, is like building the different levels, the musical components, and providing students different opportunities to play those. So if it's just like a simple bourdon or a steady beat, that could be really hard for a student, where in other ways, like students can be challenged by playing something that's more intricate or more detailed. When it comes to like guitar or ukulele or recorder, adjusting like fingering on the ukulele, I've seen so many teachers color code all the fingerings for their instruments and then making sure that color coding match whatever visuals they had on the board. There's lots of different ways to differentiate instrumentation. I think the next component that we've been talking about is also differentiating these language components as well. So having sentence frames that support all different levels of students, having language supports if they need that, a word bank if necessary, potentially having sentence frames translated for students so they have access. So we can't only think about the instrumentation, but also thinking about when they're asked or invited to share their understanding. We want to make sure they also feel confident and have the ability to do that, whether they're emerging language learners of English or a student who could just go write a page on this thing. So we have to remember that we have all these different levels. So how can we give access points to all of our students?
I just remembered when I was a kid, I had a little keyboard and my grandma put pieces of tape on each of the keys with the letter of the note. Thanks, Grandma Thelma, for being one of the original differentiators of music instruction.
It's true, right? I mean, it's like little things like that that we can start off, but then take away. With a little piece of tape, it's like you can take that off when students don't need it. And I think that's the thing we have to remember. Differentiation is giving students what they need to have equitable opportunities, but not having that live and be like a crutch for them. Once you know where that middle C is, it's like you can remove that, or you remove all the other letters and keep middle C, and then you slowly remove that. I think that's the key. And sometimes I know as a teacher myself, I didn't always remove that scaffold, or I could have over scaffold at times looking back now. So I think that's the important piece. I think as I've grown as an educator and now a coach, and being in so many classrooms, I think the key is remembering that we need to take that scaffold away when it's no longer needed, and always continue to be pushing students to be able to build their own confidence that they can do it. The more we keep giving it to them, the more they're going to keep taking it and not have to utilize and build that muscle.
Those are some great modifications and extensions that music teachers can share with their students. We have a lot more listed in that chapter of the book. Before we move on to our last question, I've had several really phenomenal adapted PE teachers on this podcast. In the book, you detail a couple of different ways that instruments can be modified for students who might have exceptional needs. Can you share just one or two of those before we move on?
Some of the adaptations I've tried in my classroom and also seen in others' classrooms are just adjusting potentially the height of instruments. Some students might need instruments to be higher, they might need them to be lower. They might need instruments to be secured to their wheelchair or to their own bodies in some way for them to be successful. So that's really important, first and foremost, to make sure students have the ability to play the instrument that's in front of them. Another thing that I've used in my classroom was just good old Velcro, connecting instruments to a table to make sure they're not moving, or even Velcro straps connected to students' limbs, right? So they could play a xylophone, so they can play a drum, so they can use a mallet. You could also adjust the weight of mallets. The larger head of the mallet can support a student having better access to playing. It really depends on the child in front of you. I've supported a teacher in ensuring student could play the recorder by buying different pieces that would cover up certain holes for them that they couldn't do on their own. Really, it circles back to having to know your students and know their needs. And I think the biggest important thing I have learned with adapting instruments is talking to the child who needs the adaptation. Really talking to the child and asking them what's most comfortable for them, what will be most helpful, and doing that in a private setting so they feel comfortable to be able to tell you exactly what they need. And they might need things that they don't actually want other people to see. So we also have to really think about that as well. But there are so many different ways, and we do want to make sure that every child who comes into our classroom has access to the learning and to the objective that we're trying to engage them in.
All right, Amy, one last question for you. You and I have both taught and now support teachers in performance or demonstration-based subjects. Can you think of any ways that PE and music teachers could collaborate more intentionally or learn from each other?
Yeah, I think it's interesting in education how often we forget that the people around us have these other amazing contents and that we can connect with them, and how wonderful it is for students to be able to, one, see adults collaborating and learning from each other, and two, seeing how these contents have so much crossover. Everything around rhythm and movement and coordination, teamwork live in both disciplines. Yes, we have solo performers, but a lot of making music is as an ensemble. Just like in a game of soccer, you have to work together. When you're playing a piece of music, every single part is important. We have to listen for each other. We have to be watching who's coming in and when. So all those things are really important. I was at a workshop a few years ago and they did this amazing, I think it's called rhythmic drumming. They used exercise balls and drumsticks and lots of movement, of course. It was all playing to different music, different rhythmic ostinatos, different tempos of music. And it was so fun. I left there thinking like, I want to do this every day. I want to go back and do this with my PE teacher because it was fun. I was learning things around exercise and also getting really good exercise in. And also I was just thinking of all the different things I could say, okay, right here, you're doing this thing that we've learned in music, and you're also connecting that with what you've learned in PE. I think another way is just collaborating with the person. If you can't actually get kids together in the same classroom, but just knowing kind of what we're teaching. If you knew I was teaching, tempo of music, which is fast and slow, but we don't say fast and slow in music. We say largo, we say allegro or presto. You could be using those words in PE and vice versa. If there was something you were working on, I could be like, yeah, this actually connects to what you're doing in PE right now.
I've seen some PE teachers teach that drumming lesson that you just talked about. I love when I get to observe teachers doing that one. And I love your ideas about the vocabulary words. We actually planned out one of the lessons in the book has students performing locomotor movements in one of the activities. I don't know if it was a grouping activity. I can't quite recall exactly, but that just shows that PE teachers can use words like largo and allegro, and music teachers can maybe incorporate things like, skipping or galloping into their lessons when appropriate, of course.
And I mean, skipping and galloping is in music. It's like I have never taught, I think, a pre-K or kindergarten or first grade lesson that didn't include that. If we can think more intentionally about how we're teaching that, so it's similar to our colleagues, or making that connection for students. This is just like you do in PE, and adding on to that, it's huge for students. My best experiences in teaching K-8 were the times where all of the arts and teachers came together and we did really amazing, wonderful, like arts integrated lessons. I remember one rainforest in the art, they were making all these rainforest things and it filled the hallways. In second grade, they were growing plants. And then in first grade, they were doing like a rainforest cafe and they had to write all the menus and count all the money. And in PE, they were doing other things that connect to the rainforest, different movements, different activities that, involved like moving like a big elephant and whatever. And those are things that kids remember, but those are the lessons that are most impactful when we can really all work together and show kids how this learning happens in all these places.
Music teachers, the book Distinguished Music Education is available on Amazon, and it's linked in the notes to this episode. Grab a copy if you can, leave a review, and reach out to Amy with any questions or feedback. Amy@distinguishedmusic.com. Amy, I hope you don't mind that I shared your email address with listeners.
No, please. I'm happy to hear from anyone.
Amy, thanks for taking the time to be on the podcast, for writing this book, and for doing all of the future projects that I have planned for you that you just don't know about yet.
Can't wait. Can't wait. Thanks, Gary.